You are born around the year 1465 in Nuremberg, one of the richest cities in the Holy Roman Empire. If you had arrived in almost any other household, your future might still be uncertain. You could learn a trade, enter a workshop, carry goods through the market, or perhaps serve a wealthy family. But your family is connected to the city executioner, and that changes the meaning of childhood before you are old enough to understand why. The problem is not that your family has broken the law. The problem is that your family carries it out. Nuremberg needs an executioner because its government possesses the power to punish crimes against the body and, when ordered, to take life. By the 14th century, the city's own institutions had taken an increasingly central role in criminal justice. Prison cells sat beneath the town hall, and outside the walls stood the Rabenstein, the large execution structure used for public punishment. The city has judges, counselors, guards, prisons, laws, and crowds willing to watch. But eventually somebody still has to perform the sentence. That person stands much closer to your family than anyone else would like. You first notice the difference through ordinary things. Perhaps another child is called home when the two of you play too long. Perhaps an adult becomes uncomfortable when you enter a workshop. You begin learning that honor in this world is not simply about whether you personally behave well. It can attach itself to birth, occupation, family, and physical contact. In Nuremberg, this prejudice is not theoretical. In 1463, only a few years before your birth, a blacksmith helped the executioner with a hanging and was mocked afterward because he had assisted a man considered dishonorable. One moment of cooperation could threaten another craftsman's social standing. That teaches you something unpleasant very early. The executioner is powerful only when the city wants something done. The rest of the time, that same power becomes contamination. Your home makes the contradiction even stranger. During the 15th century, sections of Nuremberg's old defensive works beside the Pegnitz lost their military purpose, and the city converted part of them into service quarters for the executioner and his assistant. So your household is not simply hiding somewhere beyond civilization. You live in property connected to the city itself, close to the river and surrounded by urban life. The government gives the executioner a place in its machinery, while society keeps him near its edge. As a small child, the tools around the house do not yet have the meaning they will later acquire. Rope is rope. Iron is iron. A blade is something adults tell you not to touch. Eventually, however, you understand why these objects are kept carefully and why neglect is dangerous. The executioner does not simply arrive on an appointed morning, pick up a convenient axe, and hope for the best. A sentence performed before the public has to work. Rope, restraints, blades, transport, assistants, guards, the condemned prisoner, and the execution place all have to come together at the correct time. Your education, therefore, looks very different from the training of a baker or goldsmith. The surviving late medieval records do not give us a neat apprenticeship manual for a Nuremberg executioner, so there is no honest way to invent one. What they do show is an established municipal office requiring an executioner and an assistant, and later, German evidence shows how occupational exclusion could push such families into their own professional and marriage networks. You learn through proximity, repetition, observation, and eventually participation. By the time other boys are becoming journeymen, you are learning the practical consequences of a failed punishment, and there is a great deal more to understand than how to kill someone. The condemned person does not belong to you. The sentence does not belong to you. The city decides who is guilty and what punishment is ordered. Nuremberg's council and judicial institutions control the process. You are the final instrument of a decision made above you. That gives you a strange kind of protection. When you perform the sentence correctly, you are not legally committing private murder. You are acting for public authority. But socially, people may still look at the blood on your hands rather than the officials whose judgment placed it there. By your teenage years, you begin seeing punishment as work rather than legend. Some condemned people are hanged. Others are beheaded. Punishments can also involve the body without ending in death. Different crimes, social circumstances, interventions, and judgments can produce different sentences. What matters to you is that each method creates a different practical problem. A hanging depends on the rope, structure, restraint, and handling of the prisoner. A beheading demands control, placement, a suitable weapon, and accuracy. A public punishment that looks like a single movement to the crowd may represent hours of preparation for the people responsible for carrying it out. The sword becomes the object you respect most. It has no magic. That is precisely why it frightens you. Steel can be maintained, damaged, sharpened, mishandled, or badly used. Your body also matters. Distance matters. Balance matters. The position of the condemned person matters. Nerves matter. The crowd certainly matters. A craftsman who makes a poor chair loses a customer. An executioner who makes a bad stroke may discover that several hundred furious spectators have suddenly become experts in execution. Around 1482, when you are roughly 17, the profession stops being something you merely watch. Nuremberg records tell us that a watchman named Tanner was hanged for theft that year. His punishment did not end when he died. His body was left at the gallows and was stolen on the third day. The authorities then paid the city's dog catcher to return the corpse to the gallows. The episode reveals something important about the world you are entering. The execution is not simply the instant of death. Bodies, display, reputation, public memory, and the maintenance of punishment afterward all belong to the same civic performance. For you, that means a working day may involve long periods in which absolutely nothing dramatic happens. You check equipment. You wait for instructions. You hear about prisoners without knowing whether their case will end in release, corporal punishment, or death. You may be summoned only after officials have already spent days or weeks dealing with accusations, testimony, confinement, and judgment. When nothing is happening, your profession still follows you through the street. You can put down the sword. You cannot put down the name attached to it. Money makes the situation more complicated. Executioners are outsiders, but they are not necessarily starving outsiders. Nuremberg paid for the work it demanded. Late 15th century evidence records a payment of 5 shillings to the executioner for an execution. That does not mean every year produces the same income, nor that one fee tells us the entire household budget. But it destroys the simple picture of the executioner as a wandering brute paid with whatever coin somebody throws at him. You occupy an office with recognized tasks and compensation. The city can dislike your social status and still keep accounts of what it owes you. This creates one of the strangest experiences of your adult life. A respectable citizen might not want you beside him at a table, yet his taxes help support the legal system that employs you. A craftsman may fear being dishonored by helping you, yet the government can require guards and officials to stand beside you during a punishment. People who would rather not touch your hand may gather in large numbers to watch that hand work. You are rejected and employed at exactly the same time. By your 20s, practice begins replacing fear with routine. That does not mean you enjoy the work. It means that the movements stop being completely unfamiliar. You learn where to stand. You learn what must be inspected twice. You learn that the condemned do not behave like wooden figures. Someone may faint, resist, pray, stumble, freeze, struggle, or simply become physically difficult to move. Guards can control the crowd and prisoner, but once the sentence reaches its final stage, attention turns toward you, and competence changes your status inside your own narrow world. The younger assistant watches what you do. Officials notice whether you create problems or solve them. Your household depends on your reliability. A cleanly completed punishment means the crowd goes home talking about the condemned person and the crime. A botched punishment means they may go home talking about you. Marriage brings another consequence. The office may not be written into law as a possession that automatically passes from father to son, yet occupational dishonor can close doors until family networks begin behaving almost as if it were hereditary. Evidence from German executioners and related dishonored trades becomes especially clear in the following generations. Families increasingly marry within a geographically scattered occupational circle because respectable local households hesitate to accept them. Sons learn the work because alternative careers may be difficult. Daughters may find their marriage choices narrowed by the reputation of their fathers. So when your first child is born, the event carries a question that other fathers do not have to ask. What exactly have you given this child? There is a roof. There is income. There is proximity to municipal authority. Your household may even have greater material security than some laboring families around you. But there is also your name, your profession, and the invisible border society has drawn around both. Your child has never harmed anyone. That may not matter. Dishonor can travel through a family faster than guilt. Meanwhile, the city continues sending you work. The route becomes familiar, from confinement and judgment inside the urban center toward punishment performed before the public. Nuremberg's Rabenstein stood outside the walls in the Galgenhof area on a substantial brick execution site that existed by the 15th century. The journey there matters because executions are not private administrative procedures. They are public demonstrations that justice has been investigated, pronounced, and physically carried out. The crowd is part of the punishment. That does not mean every execution attracts the entire population, nor that every spectator wants blood. Public gatherings contain curiosity, fear, religious concern, political feeling, entertainment, anger, and simple human fascination. The authorities need spectators because punishment is meant to communicate something. But a crowd is useful only while it accepts the message. If the execution goes wrong, the same people who were supposed to witness government control can suddenly witness government failure. By the 1490s, you understand this perfectly. You are no longer the boy studying rope and steel. You are the person younger men watch. Years of ordinary competence have created something valuable: reputation. You know your tools. Officials know your work. The public may despise your profession, but at least they can expect you to perform it. And then comes 1498. 2 men are to be beheaded on the same day. One is recorded as a horse thief. On paper, the job is familiar. That may be what makes the disaster so dangerous. There is no great battle approaching, no collapsing city, no extraordinary machine. There is a sword, a condemned man, another condemned man waiting behind him, officials nearby, soldiers, and a crowd expecting the executioner to do exactly what an executioner is supposed to do. The first stroke fails. The head does not separate. There is no private room in which you can stop, replace the scene, and begin again. Everyone sees it. The condemned man is still in front of you, the crowd is reacting, and the government's carefully organized display of justice is becoming something else. You strike again, but according to the surviving chronicle, the situation becomes so disastrous that the executioner ultimately uses the sword like a saw to finish the beheading, and the second prisoner is still waiting. This is where every comfortable image of professional routine disappears. Your arms have already worked. Your concentration has already been shattered. The crowd has seen enough to know that something is wrong. Somewhere behind all of this is the knowledge that failing a second time will not look like bad luck. You position the next condemned man. You swing. The stroke lands too high. The chronicler records that the head, or enough of it, finally falls. But the damage to your reputation has already been done. The crowd begins shouting. Young men threaten to stone the executioner. The people who came to watch the city punish criminals now appear ready to punish the city's executioner instead. Soldiers and the judge have to protect him, escorting him away between horses. Think about what that means. A few minutes earlier, you were the legal hand of Nuremberg. Guards stood nearby because authority supported what you were doing. Now those same guards are the reason you may reach home alive. Nothing about your official role has changed. The sentences were legal. The condemned men were delivered to you by the authorities. Yet competence was part of the unspoken bargain between executioner and society, and you have broken it in public. This is the moment your whole career has been training you for, and the moment training cannot undo. You return toward the city through a crowd that has seen your worst day. Eventually, you reach the quarters associated with your office beside the Pegnitz. The river still moves beneath the buildings. The equipment is still yours. Your family is still there. And this is where the execution becomes more interesting than the scaffold. The surviving account tells us about the failed strokes and the threatened stoning. It does not safely give us every private conversation that followed, so we should not invent one. But the human consequences are easy to understand without manufacturing dialogue. Your children live in the same city as the spectators. Your household depends on the same office whose reputation has just been damaged. Tomorrow, you still have to walk through streets occupied by people who watched what happened. Perhaps this is the clearest difference between your life and that of the condemned. Their relationship with the scaffold ends there. Yours follows you home. Years continue moving. Your hands acquire scars and stiffness. Tasks that once depended on strength now demand more concentration. The sword that seemed almost impossibly heavy when you were young eventually feels familiar, and then, much later, begins feeling heavy again for a completely different reason. Age is dangerous in any physical occupation. In yours, weakness does not merely reduce productivity. A small loss of control can become public catastrophe. So another person has to learn. Perhaps it is an assistant. Perhaps it is a relative. And perhaps, increasingly, it is your own son. By the early modern period immediately following your lifetime, German executioner families are clearly forming extensive hereditary professional networks. Social exclusion helps produce the very thing respectable society then treats as suspicious: generations of executioners related to other executioners. If outsiders refuse to marry your children and honorable trades hesitate to admit them, the family must look toward people living under the same stigma. A son already knows the tools, the officials, the routines, and the practical knowledge. The profession begins reproducing itself because society has made escape difficult. You may not want that for him, but wanting is only one part of medieval life. You can teach him to inspect a blade. You can show him how to handle rope without tangling it. You can explain where to stand and why a crowd must never be ignored. You can warn him about the day in 1498 when 2 bad strokes nearly turned an execution into your own beating. These lessons could keep him alive. Every lesson also makes him more capable of becoming you. Eventually, your body decides what pride will not. Your shoulders tire more quickly, your grip weakens. Recovery takes longer. The city cannot build its criminal justice around whether an aging executioner feels strong that morning. Someone else must take more of the physical work. You move from doing to watching, exactly as the older men once watched you. The transition may feel like relief until you understand what has happened. The younger man now carries the sword. You carry the name. Retirement does not turn an executioner into an ordinary citizen. The city cannot erase decades of memory because your hands have become too old to work. The office may pass away from you, but the social consequences remain attached to your household. Later, Nuremberg history would show that this status was not completely impossible to overcome. The famous 16th century executioner Franz Schmidt eventually gained citizenship and fought successfully to restore his family's honor, but his unusual success is valuable, precisely because it shows how important honor remained to executioners and their descendants. Your own ending is quieter. No enormous crowd needs to gather. No scaffold is required. You have spent a lifetime being present at moments when other people discovered exactly when they would die. But your death is more likely to arrive through the ordinary dangers of age, illness, and the limited medicine available to everyone around you. The strange part is what survives. The judges change. Counselors die. Prisoners become names in records. Crowds forget most of the executions they once hurried to see. Even the terrible day in 1498 survives only because somebody wrote down what happened. But your profession does not disappear. Your child knows where the equipment is kept. He knows which official may knock at the door. He knows the road from the city toward the place of punishment. And he knows something you learned before you were old enough to understand it. Other families may be allowed to imagine several futures for their children. Yours may be offered only one. That is what life as a late medieval executioner is really like. The killing is the most visible part, but it occupies only moments of a life shaped by everything around it. Training, tools, government orders, money, public expectation, family, physical skill, social shame, and the constant need to remain competent in front of people who may already despise you. You are not simply outside society. That would almost be easier. You are attached to it. The city gives you a home because it needs you nearby. It pays you because the work is official. It sends guards when you perform its sentences. It depends on your skill to turn judgment into visible reality. And when the work is finished, the crowd can recoil from the very person who made that system function. Nuremberg's records capture that contradiction unusually well. Helping the executioner could damage another man's honor. Yet when an executioner failed publicly in 1498, city soldiers had to protect the same dishonored man because he was still their servant. Near the end of your life, perhaps you watch your grown son lift the sword you once learned to hold. For him, it is still only steel. For you, it contains your entire life. Childhood, income, fear, authority, marriage, isolation, skill, failure, survival, the faces of crowds, the walk home afterward, and now inheritance. The city needed someone to do what everyone else wanted done, but almost nobody wanted to touch. You spent your life doing it. The final punishment was discovering that when the city was finished kneading your hands, it could still leave the stain on your children.